Hello, this is Debbie McAllister, and this is Light Up Your Worth. So excited. I have a really quite amazing guest for you, and I cannot wait for you to meet her, Rachel Strivelli. So she is a psychic and a creative. And I'm going to plug in, she's an expert gardener, which you'll learn more about that too. She helps people connect to their inner wisdom, feel confident, and get ready to take action or rest or self set boundaries depending on what we're going through in our life right now. So if you want a boost of confirmation and confidence and a feeling of security, you can tune into Rachel to tap back into the groundiness of spirit, self-love, and your beautiful gifts. A former school teacher and a garden educator, she supports the growth and creative expression of all. So if you want to stop, I should say, doom scrolling and start manifesting, follow Rachel. She has been featured on Thrive Global, Tina Buddha, Scary Mommy, Positive, and My Design Life. I'm so excited to have you here, Rachel. Welcome.
Thank you, Debbie. And now I can say I've been featured on Light Up Your Words. So,
Right?
woohoo!
And I have to say, for the listeners, they can't see you unless they're watching on YouTube, but you have the
Uh-huh.
most beautiful, like emerald green, sparkly shirt. And I'm like, wow, I want to go change almost and put on my sparkly shirt that I have.
Well, this morning I was tuning into what was I going to wear. And at first I thought I want to wear green, and I have a green dress that I made it myself a couple years back. But I go in my closet and this shirt was calling to me. And I was like, I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to wear more sparkles occasionally. And I thought, I'm not sure if I'm ready, but inside, then my inner voice was like, come on now, if we're going to light up our words, we got to be sparkly, we got to be shiny. Let's just
Right?
bring all the reflections and shimmeriness.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Yes, because we have to, and I love that you listen to your own intuition, following that and how that's so important for all of us.
Yes. Oh, I agree. And it's funny. We can listen to it in super simple ways. Like, was this a serious decision? No. Is it like life altering? Well, who knows? Maybe. But at any point in your day, especially if you're just starting to listen to your intuition, you can take a moment to get quiet and reflect and ask yourself a question. Is it this or is it that? Do I want coffee now or do I want tea? And instead of just going for what you always go for, maybe listen and see, is there something your intuition wants to tell you? So that's one super easy way to start listening to your intuition of what. And some of us, I think, do this already. It's like, what do I feel like wearing today? What do I feel like eating today? That's a daily way we're already checking in with, what do I need?
Oh, I love that. And I agree. It's the simple things. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
practicing on the simple little intuitive hits that
Mm-hmm.
helps us build confidence into listening to when you start getting the bigger things that come up.
Yes, exactly. Right. Because much like an athlete, which I'm not very athletic, so maybe this is a bad analogy, but if they're going to run a marathon, they start with the smaller races and then they know they can finish a marathon. And with intuition, if you start with listening to the smaller hits, then when you get a big hit of leave this relationship or avoid that person or talk to that person or sell your house or whatever, like things, leave your job or apply for that job, like things that feel big. If you're already used to listening to your intuition, you feel a little bit more comfortable doing something that feels a little bit out of the blue and like a big
Yes.
emotional leap.
Yes. Yeah, completely agree. It's practice, practice, practice. Trust,
Mm-hmm.
trust, trust. I
Mm-hmm.
love that. What's really amazing, Rachel, is when I went looking for you. And
Mm.
when we connected, because I was interested I haven't gardened, right? And
Uh-huh.
so I was really fascinated with the interaction of gardening and spirituality. And I was really interested in the gardening aspect and how it connects in with our spirituality, and keeping us in this growth path that we end up going
Mhm.
down, right? These spiritual awakenings that we have. And
Mhm.
so I would love to hear your perspective on how the gardening type of work, I guess it's being in the
Mhm.
dirt and
Yes.
how that comes together with spirituality. And then I
Mhm.
have another follow-up question about the trees.
Oh,
So,
great.
because I saw something that you posted about the trees and I was like, "Oh, I'm so drawn to trees too." So I don't want to forget to put that
Ooh,
out there, but I wanted
yes.
us to go down and talk about the trees. And then we're going to go into all of the psychic information that you are receiving as you move now into
Awesome.
these different aspects. So,
Yes.
if we could start out talking about that connection with spirituality and gardening.
Mhm. Oh, yes, and I will there's many different ways I could go with this, so I probably will be surprised with what comes out of my mouth at some point
Yeah.
today. Because sometimes the more I talk about it or with a different person, new things come up and I see things in a new way. So one of the things I love about gardening is as human beings, gardens have been with us for many hundreds of years. So we've been interacting with plants in this way of cultivating them for quite a long time. And and now most of us it's a luxury of it's not necessarily for survival that we have to do it. It and some people do it more for the survival part of it, but it's a choice of I want to feed myself something healthier, I want to interact with plants, I want beautiful flowers, or I want to grow my own herbs. And so when you make this choice to start working with the land, what I find is you start connecting to this relationship that's been going on for quite a long time between humans and plants. And different things start changing in you. And depending on how conscious you want to be about it or how you want to think about it, it may take its own path for different people. So some people find they start a garden and all of a sudden they think, how did I grow so much? I hardly did anything. I put in a couple seeds and the crops I'm giving away things. I'm an amazing gardener. And so like one thing gardening can teach us is in a way it's like magic. You put a seed in the ground and if your soil is good enough and it gets watered, sometimes that's all you have to do and then you get food out of it. And if that's not manifesting, I don't know what is.
Right? Yeah, that is
Yeah.
definitely manifesting.
Yeah. And really, you just need mostly the element of time because if you plant a seed today, okay, you're not getting your produce next week.
Yeah.
If it's basil, it might not be that long, but if it's a pumpkin, you're going to be waiting 3, 4 months. And so there's this element of patience and I almost feel that any growth experience that you need to be going through or that you feel called to do, like if you're like, oh, I really want to work on my money mindset or my relationships, going and working in the garden can be a great way to start reflecting on what are the thoughts I'm thinking, what am I noticing. I often occasionally I'll garden listening to a podcast or music. A lot of times I'm just out there walking around looking at the plants, thinking about what do they need. And one of the benefits also I think that gardening or being with trees or anywhere in nature can do for us in the spiritual way is plants have a very I feel like they almost work at like a different speed than we do and a different
Mhm.
pace. They don't have a lot of this questioning of their own worth or can I accept myself? I'm just a Brussels sprout plant. I'm just a I'm just a green bean plant. I'm just a sunflower. No, they're just being their best sunflower self. And yes, the environment matters. So that's also when you're out there working in the garden, it's like, oh, this plant needs more water. Let me care for it. And it can also, in subtle ways, start making you think about, well, maybe I need more water. Maybe there's too many weeds in my life. so that I can't stretch out my arms and grow.
Oh, I love that analogy. Maybe there's too many weeds in my life. Oh, did you
And
guys just
here's
all get
another,
that? Boom.
yeah. I had this crazy experience a couple years back. So violets are edible. It's a
Oh,
flower
okay.
called violet, and the flowers are edible. And sometimes if you go to like a fancy bakery or a restaurant, they'll have
Mhm.
violets that were coated in candied sugar, and you'll see these edible flowers on desserts. So in my garden, I had a strawberry patch, and there were a few violets at the edge of it. And I thought to myself, well, violets are edible. I don't really count that as a weed. I'm just going to leave it there. And then there was my strawberry patch. Well, then the next year there were a few more violet plants in the strawberry patch. I didn't do anything about it because I kept on thinking violets that I don't consider it a weed and it gets to stay. I can eat them. But within a few years, one spring I go out to my patch, it's now a violet patch, not a strawberry patch. And
Oh.
yes, I can eat violets, but you have to eat a lot of violets to fill yourself up. And I love strawberries so much. So I was hoping I'd go out there and get a quart of strawberries or 2 quarts. But instead, the violets had totally taken over. And for me, it was this realization it's not, weeds can get a bad connotation, but really it's just about our own assessment of it. But I had been letting the violets run rampant over my strawberry patch, but it was supposed to be a strawberry patch. And so that year, then I was like, all right, I'm putting up my boundaries. And I weeded out all the violets. And from then on, I didn't care if a weed was edible. This was a dedicated strawberry patch. That's the only thing that was allowed to grow there. And I just stayed true to that. And I started realizing life is like that too. Like there's a lot of things they might be good for you or me or everybody listening, but if your ultimate goal is I want a quart of strawberries or 2 gallons of strawberries, you actually have to create the situation and weed out what is going to hinder your strawberry production. And so in my life, there's a lot of sometimes when I make my list at the new year, these are all the things I want to do, then I remind myself I'm not superhuman. I do sleep at night. I have a fan. So let's narrow the what I want to do this year to 2 or 3 things, not 20 things, because it's just not realistic, even if they all sound amazing.
Wow, that is such a wisdom nugget, Rachel, of really thinking about what you just shared about life or what we're creating. If our seeds aren't growing the way we wanted, that are not flourishing into a plant, what's in our environment? The
Mm-hmm.
soil, the water, are we feeding it? Are we resting it? Are we the right temperature? All the details that go into that. And what is in there, just like the violets, like what's
Yeah.
there that may not necessarily be bad, but it's taken away the focus of the environment and it's starting to take over more and more gradually.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yes.
always think of that as like, the frog doesn't realize it's in a boiling water or the lobster because it's slow. And there's
Mm-hmm.
such an analogy with the garden growing with the violets and the strawberries with our lives. We don't all of a sudden we've allowed no boundaries. All of a sudden
Yes.
you're up and you're getting 6 hours of sleep and you're exhausted and
Mhm.
now all of a sudden you don't have the energy, you're tired, you're not going to eat well. It starts
Mhm.
this process and you're like, now how did I get here?
Right.
How do I start to take a look at, stepping back with the seed growing? I think
Mhm.
it's almost this really beautiful thing I think about with if we're starting something new and we want to go plant something. So what has a longer, like you're talking about a pumpkin. So say
Mhm.
you're even a something in a small area, what would be something that you could even kind of test yourself with to
Mm.
remind, I don't want to say test, but remind you really of it's
Mhm.
all there happening under the soil. and
Yes.
it's growing the roots and the
Right.
is there a
Yes.
few like I got introduced to some gardening at my sister's and her husband. They love gardening and they're really been getting into it the last umpteen years now. And I was staying there, and so I bought that's when I went they, got to their seeds, right? So I went and I thought, "Well, I'm gonna go buy all these seeds and, these rare seeds," and I bought these from Baker Creek Heirloom Seed Company, by the way,
Yes. I like that
and
company.
and I love what they stand for. I mean,
Mhm.
wow. I mean, I'll share the link because they were phenomenal of their story, and I'm not gonna share their story, but
Mhm.
so I got interested, and so I went and bought, like, multiple kinds of basil. I was like, "Well, what do I like? What won't be that difficult?" I'm told it's not all that difficult.
Yeah.
So I bought all these seeds, and then I moved, and so I'm gonna plant some of them now, but so when I was staying there I saw them go through the whole process of, the soil, they were prepping the soil.
Mhm.
They kept it under these lights in the house until it was
Mm.
warm enough, right? So that they were
Mhm.
growing the seeds. And then they were gonna go move these little containers outside, but it was too cold, so they brought them back in. After being out there
Mhm.
for a couple hours, they're like, "Nope, not quite warm enough." So then
Mhm.
fast forward the 4 months I'm not there, I come to the house to take care of the house and the dogs because there's a family, health crisis that happens with my brother-in-law.
Mm.
So he's off in ICU, I'm in the house, so I'm working during the day, and every day it's harvest season, and so what am I doing? I'm out there barefoot picking the most like, I can't even like, melt in your mouth cherry tomatoes were my favorite.
Mm.
Fresh berries, kinda tells you what season it was, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
cucumbers, and I'm out there barefooted, my hands in it, I'm getting dirty, clipping her basil, doing this thing, and just sitting there and watching. They had let one basil plant she said, "Just let it go, that's for the bees."
Yeah.
We want something for the bees. And I
Yeah,
thought,
yeah,
oh, so
yeah.
you come out there and there would be all these bees working, and I could just be sitting there and watching these bees. It was we have a major health crisis happening, like life and death
Mhm.
every day.
Mm.
And I'm out there, and that garden, I think, just saved me mentally, like my own mental
Mhm.
health of planting
Yes.
my feet in the ground and being able to ground myself in touching
Mhm.
Mother Earth, and it
Mhm.
was so, like, beyond like, I feel like I up-leveled my own ability inside, that inner wisdom to be
Mhm.
able to connect in. Now, who would
Yes.
know that we had already connected, right? Like, this was already scheduled, and yet now I have
Yeah.
this huge, like, experience of how gardening really connected me back,
Wow.
and
I love that.
and I'm sure that you've seen this with people that you've worked with. Um,
Yes. And I also I for me it's true too of if I'm having the some of the most difficult pivotal moments of my life, other people are nice, but I like to go out and sit in the garden or sit in a forest and because sometimes I find the comfort we need it needs to be wordless, needs to be an experience. And there are times where I've sat under a tree and cried till I was done. And then I looked at the leaves, I looked at the ants, and there's to me, there's almost a comfort of nature's keeping on doing its thing. And I can feel like everything is happening within me, like a storm and waves of emotion but I love the groundedness, the steadiness that the trees and the insects and the earth can give us. Because to me, and maybe this is why the whole Mother Earth concept or Gaia or any of the names for it came about, is to me, it's that original nurturing, creative, generative energy of you can go there and feel like a mother's hug in the best kind of
mm,
way, but the mom's not nagging you like, well, why'd you do this and why'd you do that and blah blah blah. not that moms nag, but like in
Yeah.
any human
Yeah.
relationship, there's some of that stuff that comes up. And not to say that you go out and hang out with the trees and nothing's ever going to come up, but to me, I find it can be a relationship where it gives you something that you don't necessarily get from a human relationship. Like I almost
Mhm.
feel the plants and the insects and the mushrooms, maybe they're the wisest things on this planet. And like we think humans are so great, but what if we're the dumb ones? Not dumb in a bad way, but like what if
Yeah.
we're like the primitive things and all the other organisms have just got us beat with like their profound wisdom of being a living organism?
Yeah, because I'm sure like what you had mentioned too, I don't think an ant's wondering if it's a good ant. Is it good enough?
Yeah.
Just like the sunflower. I'm just gonna shine, and then at night I close down and rest, and then I come back out and I
Mm-hmm.
shine again,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not wondering if I'm the best sunflower here. I'm
Exactly.
just a sunflower.
Yes, and that's why I also find being around plants and other things like that can be so nourishing and nurturing to your soul. I have this program called Nourish Your Soul with Nature that's about sitting in nature every day and just being mindful and observing. And a lot of people who go through it, they get this sense of calm and peace and self-acceptance because it feels like the pace of life slows down a little bit and you notice things and you can start to be more compassionate to yourself. And actually, that is supported by research. The more time you spend out in nature, your creativity goes up, your empathy goes up, your emotional resilience goes up, or emotional intelligence. Maybe it's both. So many of the qualities that we want improve
Mhm.
in our life by spending time out in nature, and also happiness levels and optimism. And so to me, when you have a spiritual life or a religious life, like one of the reasons you're having that in your life is so on the hard days or the hard times, you have something that sustains you and supports you throughout that helps you find your worth again or find your
Mhm.
hope again. And I think that's one of the reasons that nature can help support that in you, is because there's this constancy and this beauty. And also I also really like that it's really accessible. Most of us, we can, it's not that far to go to have a park, to have a potted plant. Even if you're in an urban environment, you could grow something likely where you live,
Mhm.
some of the bamboo that's in a little pot, or herbs inside. Or there's these countertop gardens where you can grow some
Yes, the
lettuce and
yes,
things.
they've become super. What are they like hydro somethings?
Yes,
Yes.
hydroponics.
Yes.
Yeah. So those I really enjoy. And the other element that I think is super cool with the gardening aspect is it just feels profound to me that it's something you can eat or drink in a
Mhm.
tea, or the flowers that you can smell. And so it's touching your heart, but it's also a sensual body experience of the smells or the taste. And so I like that it's like your whole being can be involved, not just your heart, or not just your eyes, or not just the taste. So and as you probably noticed when you were harvesting all that food, it to me just affirms like how amazing is life that I get to eat this fresh
Yes.
tomato that tastes so good.
And I really think it was the difference between, when I would go out there, it was very you were very present, right? I got the dogs,
Mm-hmm.
or there's 3 dogs, there's a puppy, a GSP, a lab, and a pitty mix. And so they're all like cousins, friends, right? And they're playing and kind of sniffing around, and I'm in there very present. And even if one visit out there was 15 minutes, that 15 minutes, wow. Like,
Mm-hmm.
talk about bringing you back into your body, because I think,
Mm-hmm.
especially thus in the more spiritual communities, have understand that we float out of our bodies, and you need to
Mm-hmm.
come back in. And I think it's what helped me
Yes.
from, going off in the ethers. I was
Yes.
just, close by. If I did leave my body, at least I wasn't way out there, but I was able to help
Yes.
keep me more grounded into my own self and not let
Mhm.
all of this the static energetic things that happens because we're
Mhm.
so much in our electronics these days. And
Mhm.
so I highly suggest or recommend that people
Mhm.
start something like you were saying, something even small. That's why I'm starting with basil and,
Yes.
and plants, and I'm sure I'm going to add to it now that we've been talking and I have a,
Oh,
mhm,
yes. And I think this was the original question, and I kind of went on a tangent. But if you're wondering, well, what do I start with? How
mhm.
you chose basil, I think is so smart. When I used to teach only organic gardening and not the spiritual side of it, or just spirituality in general, I always taught that start with one or two things that you already feel that you either really enjoy or you feel a connection, because it's almost like I see it as like making a friendship. You're going to get to know this one plant, its needs, its growing habit, all of those things. And you don't want to waste your time with something you don't really feel that excited about. If broccoli is not your thing, do not start with broccoli, like, or lettuce. I don't care how easy lettuce is. If you don't like salad or you don't like kale, don't start with kale. So,
I-
and herbs are kind of easy at times because usually you can buy them already in a pot with their roots. So then you just have to care for it. You don't have to start from seed.
yeah. Well, and I wanted to start from seed. It was really like almost I wanted to see all of it. Like
Oh,
I
yeah.
wanted to see the life form of it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Just like what we're doing with working with people. Like I really wanted to connect that. Like, could I take something from a seed and get it
Mm-hmm.
to actually get to its beauty, right? Of its own,
Yes.
not that it's doing it in its own acceptance of itself, but just to go through that process. And I, when I was growing up, and I think even as my son was growing up in school, they would get the little styrofoam cups
Oh,
and plant,
yeah.
and
Uh-huh.
now I'm starting to like connect in why they were experimenting with that, right? Like why they're
Yeah.
teaching them about things growing. And so it's going to be
Mm-hmm.
this really beautiful experience to learn this. And I know I have multiple friends who have gardens, even small gardens. And so thank you for those tips. I think that's super, super powerful. And then I wanted to now kind of switch gears and talk about trees, the wisdoms
Mm-hmm.
of trees.
Mm-hmm.
Because I saw you post something on it, and I thought, "Ooh,
Yes.
this is," I recently moved to Flagstaff, Arizona. For those who don't know, is at an elevation of 7,000 feet.
Oh, wow.
And it's Ponderosa pines up here. We're
Ooh.
four seasons. We're
Mm-hmm.
45 minutes north of Sedona, which is,
Okay.
very much the gorgeous energy vortex, but it's what you might think of with Arizona. And then the other direction is in northern Arizona is the Grand Canyon. And so
Wow.
we're in forest. I can look out and I can see these ponderosa pines. And I've been having, before I showed up here, I've moved around a lot. I've been in California, Wyoming, Idaho, Washington, Colorado, like all these really gorgeous places, Nevada, Reno, and they're all gorgeous on their own. But in Colorado, when I lived there in the early 2000s, is I would have dreams about trees,
Mm.
trees, trees. And now I had a friend paint a picture of trees, and now I'm living
Ooh.
back in an actual forest trees. And so
Ooh.
I'm so fascinated by your connection with the wisdom of trees and how what that looks like, from your perspective and how that's unfolding for you.
Yes, yes. Well, and so at the time that this comes out, I'll have finished a book. But at the time we're recording, I'm just at the beginning of it. So this week I went out to my porch. I like to go out in the mornings if I plan it well. and sit there with a journal, maybe water or coffee or something, and just it's almost like a meditation. I just sit there and look at the trees. And if I have questions, then I ask my questions. Or if I have a reading that day, I've gotten in the habit of, do you have anything you want to tell me before the reading? And the information, it doesn't come from me like words. It's not like the oak tree is like, well, good morning, and here are the blah blahs. I'm sure there are people that it works that way for them. It does not work that way for me. But that's fine. Like I think everybody can start to develop a relationship with a tree or with a type of tree, whether or not you ever feel like it talks to you. And so for me, I was sitting out there, and I've been wanting to work on a book, and I had a few ideas. I went through a course that was all about create a book from blog posts, and I thought, oh great, or interviews. I've got a lot of interviews, I got a lot of blog posts, and I came up with a few different topics, and I journaled on that, but I wasn't getting momentum. So I thought, okay, I don't know what's keeping me stuck here. So I asked the trees, I said, what should my book be about? And then I got the intuitive hit, talk to the trees. And at first I was surprised, because I thought, oh man, I got to write this book from scratch. I can't use any of the stuff I already have, because in terms of what I've written already, it's probably a paragraph or nothing.
Yeah.
And a little while ago, I last year, I think it was, I took a class about channeling. And what I realized during this class was I had been channeling before, but just never called it that. And so for me, like a lot of my writing feels like it's channeled. I just get ready for it and the words just flow. And I think many people have this experience with art forms of like, it comes out, and then sometimes at the end of the page or the end of the song, you think, I don't even know where that came from, but it's pretty good, and
Yeah.
I'm the one who wrote it, so I'll claim it. And so I got this hit from the trees, and I thought, okay, so I come back in, sit down at my computer, and then what I felt was the trees, pretty much I'm channeling a message. I believe right now it's going to be 10 chapters. Well, as I said, it'll be out already when this happens, but I'm 2 chapters in, and it's a series of practices or mindset shifts that the trees are sharing, that it's going to be quite a short book, but one that like maybe you pick up if you want a new practice, or that there's something that you want to work on, and you want to do it in this way and do it with the trees. So I think that it's really exciting. The trees, I find, so people we're these physical beings, but we're also spiritual beings. We're both in the same way. And the wisdom that's coming through for this book feels that it's both trying to come with the heart and the head, like with the spirit and the physical. So it's giving you things that you might know about a tree or think about a tree, but using that as a way to look at your life differently and experience a different emotion or have a different awareness. And so I'm really excited at this discovery process of where it's going to go. And I also love that, well, a few things. In the past few years, there've been a number of books coming out of this kind of flavor. And before we started recording this morning, I was thinking about this, and what used to happen for me is I would get jealous when I would see someone publish a book, and I would think that should have been me. And I've even had people say, oh, this book seems like something you would do, Rachel. But I know that when jealousy or other emotions like that come up, it's information. And so for me, the information is, well, then get out and write that book if I feel like I'm supposed to write the book. and so anyone here, if you're listening and you're like, well, I'm jealous of her, she's talking to trees. You probably have some trees near where you are. So go on and start talking to them, or whatever it is. Jealousy can be a really strong emotion, but it's like, I think if we can not just let it turn into this thing where you're feeling negative or disliking the other person, but if you see this is an invitation to look further. Like what are you not doing or seeing or feeling? Like what is going on that makes you feel I want that? Because if it's that strong, then there's a really big pull there, but it also shows it feels like there's a gap between that thing and where you are right now. And so the trees, I find that they have this lovely way of sharing, as I said, this spiritual wisdom, but also with a level of the physicality and kind of logical things that you can picture in your mind to be a really nice format for people to experience something that is maybe not so esoteric.
Mhm.
And what I also love about it is trees, depending on where you live. So some areas near you, there might not be that many, but most human settlements, human livings, we like to have trees around us. And so every time you drive by a tree or walk by a tree, it can be a reminder of, oh, I'm practicing mindfulness now, and here's a tree. Or I'm practicing stretching my branches out and my crown, and the crest of the tree is so beautiful. And that tree isn't trying to play small because trees don't play small.
Yeah. Oh.
So it's,
Mm.
I love that it can be this reminder that happens as you're going about your daily life. You can set the intention when I see a tree, it's a moment to remember whatever growth idea that you're working with, that you're trying to incorporate more into your awareness, into your being. That tree can just be a, oh, here's your reminder.
Yeah. Yeah, I what I love about that, I wanna touch on your, comparison with, like, the jealousy,
Mm,
is that so Elizabeth Gilbert
mm.
in, The Magic, what is it? It has magic in her title, just
Big
slip
magic.
The Big Magic. So she talks about that when we get
Mm-hmm.
downloads, the downloads, the channels, I got a ping, I got an idea, um, the flow, the zone is some of the words that I've used over the years, not knowing that
Yeah.
it's all channeling, like when you're
Yes.
in those zones. And so but she talks about in her book is that she got an idea and she started to work on it. It kind of stalled. And then she met somebody who was actually writing out this idea. And I
Mm-hmm.
found it was really beautiful. And I know other people talk about it, but how she explained it really resonated as we get the idea, but the ideas are coming down and they're being channeled to multiple people
Mm-hmm.
at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And where we can use that, jealousy of like, well, maybe I shouldn't be doing this, or your friend telling you, oh, that sounds like you,
Mm-hmm.
is that they do that because they know not everybody's going to step forward and shine their
Mm-hmm.
own light and step into what that idea is. And so
Yes.
it's interesting that you say a couple years ago you got that. So in 2020, at the beginning of 2021, I was getting all these downloads, ideas, and it had to do with trees, and it had to do with
Mm.
creating, alignments, sacred pockets of energy to
Ooh.
help people based upon the tree.
Oh, I love it.
So, if an oak tree is say their energy, and I don't remember what each one was, but I was
Mm-hmm.
getting like each tree has a certain characteristic about them. Like
Oh
this one,
yeah.
like redwoods, right? Like talk
Mm-hmm.
about tenacity. A
Mm-hmm.
redwood tree, tenacity, they're over hundreds and hundreds of years
Right.
old, right? And some of
Yes.
those really old wisdom trees,
Yes.
like Louisiana, look at all the trees in Louisiana. Oh my
Mm-hmm.
gosh, you touch and hug one of those trees, you can feel it. And so I was getting all these downloads and I put it on hold. I was like, yeah, that was kind of nice. I was doing some work and trying to figure out, well, what do these trees mean? Why am I keep getting that, right? The
Yeah.
characteristic of a tree. And now I
Right.
know why, because there was that message then a couple years ago was coming through to all in different ways. Oh, I just
Mm-hmm.
got truth bumps. Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. So that wasn't
Yes.
necessarily for me to carry forth,
Yeah.
but I did get it and you got it
Mhm.
Oh my gosh. Wow. What a connection, Rachel, that we're just
That
like,
is. I
ooh.
love that. Thank you. And I want to share for the listeners too. It's making me think of there's also the freedom and the permission to sue that idea. It's not the right time. I've gotten hits that felt amazing. And even the hit around the hit of like, this is a good idea. This could be like, this could break your career wide open. But there's another part of me that's like, yeah, but I don't really think I want to write that book. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want my career to break wide open about that topic. No offense,
Yeah.
idea, spirits, whoever. And so I kind of thought, thank you for this gift, but I'm going to pass. And someone else is going to jump on it, or maybe five someone's are going to jump on it. Because it also reminds me of when I like a topic, I might read 4 books about that topic. I mean, I've read a lot of books about gardening, a lot of books about spirituality, money mindset, feng shui, or yeah, whatever I'm into. If I'm really into it, I will read 10 books about the subject
Yeah.
because that's how I like to take it
Guilty.
in.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, or 10 podcasts or whatever. And so it's fun, I think, when like I almost feel like the universe is tickling us to be like, look at this. Like, how is it that all of a sudden there's 5 popular books out there about kind of a niche topic? Well, that's the idea that wants to come forth right now. And these are all the people who said, yes, okay, I'll do it. But
Mhm.
then as we're discovering, maybe there were 30 other people who got the idea or more, and they're like, I don't think I want to do anything about that.
Yeah. Yeah. I got the tree stuff, and then I also got downloads about, right after my dog passed, I
Mm.
got all these downloads about what our dogs teach us.
Oh, wow.
And it was pretty powerful, and I started writing those down too, and then it passed.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, because I thought to myself too, "Do I wanna be known as the dog whisperer?" You know, like,
Yeah.
and I thought, "No, I do love my dogs and wanna talk about them and how they have impacted my life in a positive way in spirituality, but it's around the spiritual concepts. I want people to feel more of their own worth, their own acceptance of who they are,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily tied to a trees or the
Mm-hmm.
dogs or, so,
Right.
but I wanted to also touch on is that we were talking about your YouTube channel, The Seeds of
Mm-hmm.
Self-Love. And I just thought, what a beautiful way for us to kind of talk about that whole, you know, spirituality with love and, how that flows out. And I know we had touched on that you are getting for the psychic readings that you're getting a lot of people curious about love.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yes.
wanted to see if you'll share about any of that or all of it, right? The
Yes.
seeds of
Yes.
self-love or actually, what's out there for people with love, looking for love, I know
Mm-hmm.
the so I will zip it and
Yeah. Yes. And well, the fun thing when people come to me for a reading is like I'll share some general or big ideas, but sometimes someone will come to me and they'll say, I'm dating this person. Do you think it's going to go anywhere? And I usually, there's 3 types of answers that I get. Very clear no. And it's like super clear where I want to be like, oh, honey, leave him or her or they now. And it's like, I'm sorry, but you got what you're going to get and let's not drag this on. So I get a very clear no. And then maybe there's only 2 that usually come up. Well, no, I think there are 3. And then there's something that I would call a maybe. But what the maybe truly is I don't think it's determined yet. And whether whatever you believe about fate, I every relationship takes some level of work, of growth, of commitment. And sometimes you're in a stage in a relationship where you don't know. And I've been in a stage where I didn't know. I remember asking my counselor or talking to her when I was dating my husband, and she was telling me, "Can you just be patient and let yourself date without knowing where this is gonna go, without knowing the outcome?" And that was a very big struggle for me because I wanted to have an idea, where is this going? And I had a lot of discomfort not knowing. And so who knows? When people come to me, if I say, actually, no one has been disappointed when I said it's a maybe, it's an unknown. For the people that do get that answer, typically I feel like they're a little bit more aware rather than less aware. And I've heard, you know what, I felt too that, but I didn't. It's almost like they didn't feel like it was okay to not know. But when I say we don't know yet, then they feel, oh good, like I can just let it be, I can just explore. And sometimes there's also this call to, are you showing up as the self that you want to be in this relationship, or are you wearing a mask? Because if you're wearing a mask, they can't get to know who you are because you're not being who you want to be or who you truly are. And so, how can anybody decide what's happening in the relationship?
Oh,
And then
that
the
is
other,
such truth.
yeah. And then sometimes I'll get a clear yes. I would say those types of yeses, usually people already know if it's a good relationship or if they want to stick with it a little bit longer. So it's not as astounding perhaps when I tell people, yeah, this seems like a good relationship.
Mhm.
And usually what I find is there are more things to be done in a person's own heart to be ready for the relationship, regarding who you're attracting in and what you'll tolerate. And I've had a couple clients that I said, look, delete the numbers from your phone of past relationships or people who disappointed you or all of that. Like, truly let it go. Because if you're consistently wondering, is this going to work? Is this not going to work? Generally speaking, it's not
Eh,
working, but you really want it to work. And so and I'm not saying relationships don't take work, and if it's not working, bye-bye. But typically you're going to know if you give it more time, if you're showing up as your best self. If that person isn't treating you well, then as much as you may be enamored with them, to honor yourself and your own worth, it's time to let them go.
yeah, that's beautiful. I wanna go back to this maybe
Mm,
that you touched about with, are you actually showing them who you are? And
mm,
to relax, like, even your own experience was being able to
mhm.
relax. I've you're almost afraid to admit it, right? Like, as it's
Right.
being recorded, but
I
I
know.
I was in a long-term relationship for 20 years and then didn't really date much. And then when I started to date, I always wanted to know, oh, is this going to go anywhere? Am I wasting my time? You know, and then I realized is I started to work with these coaches about love. And I
Mhm,
realized that I actually needed to enjoy the process.
mhm,
And I reconnected with a childhood friend. We got in a short relationship and we got married really quick because it just went so fast. In 6 months, we were married, like literally walking down
mhm,
the aisle. The marriage itself it didn't work as a marriage. But now
mhm,
that time has gone by, he's actually still my friend, like that
mm.
can touch base with every once in a
Yes,
while, right? Because that was actually all we were really. But
yes.
but the time that we were together was a valuable lesson for myself to learn
Mhm,
about, was I truly showing him who I was and
mhm,
where my life is now moving, or was I focused
mhm.
more on my past
Right,
versus my present?
right.
And I think what you
Yes.
said too is like, are we wearing a mask? Being able
Mhm,
to take those breaths and relax and be who we are?
mhm.
Wow. Like
Yes.
what a gift that your reading would be for somebody to really, especially those who are spiritually conscious or consciously
Mhm.
aware of their how they are what they're creating in their lives, that opportunity to know that for themselves.
Yes.
Like you I think you kind of want to know if this is a hard no.
Yes, exactly.
Like
Exactly.
do I need to like figure out how to unwind my own feelings or what are my boundaries,
Mhm.
or is this really, yeah, maybe he's the hottest guy or girl that I've ever been
Mhm.
with, but is he fulfilling who I really am?
Mhm.
Uh,
Exactly.
Yeah, that really is a gift that you're able to give people.
Oh, thank you. It feels really wonderful. And I love also when people have the realizations of, yeah, like even though it might feel unnatural to think, I'm going to take this slow, I'm going to be okay with not knowing, in that you get to have the time to get to know that person. You have the time to get to know yourself. And if you're practicing other ways of loving yourself, it does make it easier to be in that relationship without having a mask and see where it goes. Because even though maybe in popular culture or stories, fast romances seem incredible, it makes me think about the short marriage you had. It sounds like it moved very fast, but then what? It's like you haven't
Mhm.
maybe had enough time to see, and I'm not saying this to be critical in any way, but it's like if if y'all move slower, I wonder what would have happened. Or sometimes we change so much that if the other person is really different, but we just come together for a period of time where, like you said, you discovered that you were just friends. And
Mhm.
and I think how wonderful it is that sometimes it's a relationship that isn't, it might not last 5 years or 10 years, but what you got out of it was still really good.
It was
And
really, yes. Yeah. Like
yeah,
for
and
myself.
I,
Mhm.
oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, because I was like, "No, I wanna," because I think we were put together for a lesson, right?
Mm-hmm.
A really big lesson of letting things unfold naturally.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you're my favorite things are like to go out on a boat. I wanna go hiking. I want to connect with nature. I wanna go on, road trips. I love live music, right? If
Mm.
3 out of those 4, like, aren't in alignment with them, some of that common stuff is great
Yes,
to be able to share.
exactly.
And, I like to have a drink with dinner sometimes, not every day, but and
Yeah,
if you don't drink, maybe that's not good for me, right? Like, not that,
right.
or go out on, you wanna go camping and you don't camp. I mean, some big
Yes,
things, and because 'cause we're all allowed to be who we are.
exactly.
Getting caught up with
Yes.
all those hormones, so
Mhm. And the other thing that's making me think is the flip side of it too, is if you know a couple core things. I want somebody who camps, or they like to have a drink, or whatever, they like live music, but also being willing to be surprised. Because both in my relationship and many that I've seen from people who've come to me for readings or just other connections that I've seen, oftentimes you're surprised. There's something surprising that's maybe not what you logically thought your partner would be like. So even let's say if you're trying to manifest someone who is a certain type of person, and I had a list of, I still have the list actually. There were 89 things on my list of what I wanted in my partner. And I will say, when I met my husband, he probably had about 75 of those qualities, which I remember writing. I took a couple weeks to write the list. I felt like I was definitely asking for a lot, but I thought, well, hey, I'm going to dream big. But there were all these things that I didn't even think about that he brought to the relationship, even though I got all these things I wanted, it's like, be careful what you wish for, because there's everything you maybe didn't know was coming. And
Yes.
but it's like every relationship you're gonna have to grow in some way or another. So being open to the surprise of what's coming next, because my husband, he was so into sports and I could barely tell you a single thing about sports. I knew what they were, but that was about it.
Yeah.
I had probably like a 4-year-old level of knowledge about sports. And still we joke about that I really still, after all these years, hardly know anything about most of them. But so it's like we have areas where there isn't necessarily all the same things, but I was willing to be surprised and grow as a person with him, because there were other things that made it feel worthwhile that we did have in common.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really important point. And also, even though I'm talking about the external stuff that we can have in common, there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
internal qualities that are
Oh
on. I
yes.
also have a list. I had a list then, and he actually met quite a few of these things on my list as far as a
Mm.
personality, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
um this unconditional love that he had had for me since we were kids was like
Mm.
so endearing, and it still is, right? It still is.
Yeah.
I recently had a conversation with him, and for his birthday, and he just reinforced that, I will always be there for you.
Aww.
And there was a part of my soul that needed to know that that reconnection of, yes, I am lovable, right? I
Mm.
can be who I am and be lovable, and it just has, changed forms. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be the romantic love, but it was a different type of connection, and so I
Mm.
thought that, um, it was a really beautiful way to reflect about my own stuff of what you so
Mm.
I think that's why it's so why I keep coming back to, a hard no, a maybe, and a yes, because like how important that is for us as spiritual beings to be able to take
Mhm.
whatever those answers are to
Mhm.
be able to move into our own personal growth and development,
Yeah.
asking ourselves the questions. So now,
Ooh, and I'm getting tingles, so I feel like I gotta say, and even though we've been talking about love, how many other areas of life is that true too?
mhm,
Business, it's like people talk about the full body yes and all that. Sometimes it's a maybe. And we were talking kind of a little bit about this before we started recording. For the longest time, I had a hard time with the fact that I didn't have a clear type of client, or there were a lot of things in business. I felt like I was in this maybe zone. And then I had this dream, because I'm a very avid dreamer and I do dream interpretation too. And in the dream, well, actually, I don't remember all the details, but the big idea was you have to go through this long period of maybe, of not knowing, but where you're going, when you look back in hindsight, it's going to make sense. But you're in a very long period of it not making any sense. And you're just doing your best, one foot in front of the other. And the other thing about love that I have found, and my husband and I, early in our relationship, we had this whole, when it's time to know, you'll know. So like when we before we got married, we both felt like, and I think we even had a conversation where we said, we'll know when it's time to do that, if it's time to do that. And if we're not really there, then it's not time yet. And so giving, there's so many areas of life where, I mean, you can get something shipped to you sometimes the same day. You
mhm.
can't get love shipped to you the same day, or like business success or spiritual epiphany or enlightenment.
Mhm.
So staying in that maybe zone, even though it's really uncomfortable, sometimes we have long periods of time where we don't know if it's a yes or a no.
Yeah, it's like that plant. The plant's growing,
Mm-hmm.
you just can't see it, and you don't wanna give up your hope or your faith or your belief in it because it could just be popping up.
Yes.
and
Exactly.
it's doing all different types of things in there. Oh, this has been so wonderful, Rachel. Like, there's just been so many nuggets about, and connections between the gardening and the love and your all of your gifts that you bring. How would somebody be able to reach out and find you, Rachel?
Yes. Well, I've tried to make myself easy to find. And for better or worse, I'm on a lot of platforms. And my website is rachelstrivelli.com. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn. Like I said, I'm not saying I'm there all the time, but at this point, I am checking in and being a little bit active on some of those.
Yeah.
Instagram and YouTube and TikTok are my main places where I'm hanging out. And
Well, great.
so,
I will share all the links, and then your book will be published when this goes
mhm,
live. And so we'll also
yes.
include the link for that. And your YouTube is what, Seeds of Self-Love as well. And how do you
Oh,
spell
that
your
was
last? Uh-huh.
Oh, the YouTube is actually at Rachel Strivelli, but Seeds
Okay.
of Self Love is a whole series. So there's a playlist, but I have videos on other topics too.
Okay. Would you mind spelling out your last name for those who are just
Yes.
listening and not
Great. Yes. And I'll do my first name too, because some Rachel spell it differently.
okay.
So Rachel, and then Strivelli is Strivelli.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for that. For the people who are listening and they're driving right now. Or
Mm-hmm.
so we'll include it in the show notes as well so that people can go look that or see it on YouTube or the
Mm-hmm.
podcast. And so thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to get to know you a little bit more and share all your wisdom. So thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you, Debbie. This was so much fun, and hearing all your wisdom and experiences was delightful.
If you enjoyed this Light Up Your Worth episode, be sure to share with a soulful friend who needs to hear this message. Thanks so much for listening and being part of the Light Up Your Worth community. My heart is full of gratitude for you. You are my inspiration to shine the light of spiritual, heart-centered women. Now go out there and shine your own light. Sending you sunshine.